Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Eunice. Chlorella and aging. Wait, is there a relationship between chlorella and aging? Why? Of course. And today I'm going to present to you this special relationship between chlorella and anti-aging. But before I begin, I would like to introduce our roles first. Firstly, I'm going to share with you chlorella and anti-aging. And then Carmen will talk about the paper, Declining NAD induces a pseudo-hypoxic state disrupting nuclear mitochondrial communication during aging. Then Tiffany will later talk about NAD. Last but not least, Bella will talk about ATP and cordyceps. So, what is chlorella? How many of you have actually heard of it? May I have a show of hands, please? Well, none of you, right? That's why you're here today, to listen to me. So, firstly, chlorella comes from the word chloros, which means green, and ella, which means small. So by the name, we know that chlorella is a green microalgae. It is spherical in shape and has a diameter of nearly 2 to 10 micrometers. It is green, right? So it actually gives us the clue that it carries photosynthesis to multiply. You might be asking, what is in chlorella? Well, a lot of protein, fat, a little bit of vitamin, minerals, and fibers. But what makes chlorella linked to aging? What makes chlorella anti-aging is what I'm going to introduce now. Firstly, chlorella contains 1.7% to 7% of the phytochemical chlorophyll. And this is the highest concentration in known plants. Chlorophyll detoxifies our bodies, heals wounds, and because it is very rich in enzymes, it acts as an antioxidant. This is what makes chlorella anti-aging. So firstly, aging causes radicals on skin to undergo uncontrolled mutations, which causes the skin to wrinkle. Meanwhile, chlorophyll in chlorella scavenges free radicals, which replaces wrinkled skin with smooth skin. But this isn't it. Chlorella has another property that makes it anti-aging. It has 10% RNA and 3% DNA. If you compare it with canned sardines, it actually has 17 more times of RNA than the sardines. This enables accelerated growth in young people and repair damaged tissues in mature animals and humans. Lots of RNA can also enable the synthesis of NAD, which will be elaborated by my other speaker. So, this is another thing. Aging causes body production of RNA to fall, which worsens memory and learning ability. But because of the very high RNA concentration, the memory retention of one can be improved. Another thing that makes chlorella anti-aging is PS, which is usually found on the surface of brain cell membranes. It improves memory, cognition, and mood in the elderly. So firstly, aging can cause brain deterioration, which may lead to Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, or depression. Chlorella contains PS, which improves our memory and alleviates depression. So, you might be wondering, with all these wonderful benefits of chlorella, people are bound to consume it, right? But how are we going to absorb chlorella? Well, it can be by pills or in powder form, which can be incorporated into juice. But what is most special about it is that it can also be incorporated into spaghetti. Yes, spaghetti. Today, I'm proud to introduce to you that our school has actually demonstrated healthy eating lifestyle through cooking chlorella spaghetti. And it actually looks good with all the cheese and toppings. Finally, here are some paper references. And I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank my principals, Reverend Sister Margaret and Dr. Jug, for supporting me in this presentation. And I would also like to thank all of you for listening. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Miss Lee, the principal of Queens College. teachers, and everybody. So my name is Carmen, and today I'm going to be sharing with all of you some research on what Dr. Jung just mentioned, NAD, some nuclear mitochondrial communication, and last but not least, our main perspective today, aging. So first of all, what is aging? So commonly we believe it's some sort of the accumulation of changes in a person over time. And it is also the multi-dimensional process of physical, psychological, and social changes. So let's say you have another perspective on religion, or like some dimensions will grow, such as your increase in knowledge when you go to school, or while some may decline, such as your health as you age. So we commonly define aging through a few perspectives. So for age measurement, we choose to measure it chronologically, such as the number of birthdays you had. So let's say you're 16, so you probably had 16 birthdays. And also some physical traits, such as wrinkles, bone, like some sort of decrease in bone quality. For hair, there could be graying of hair or loss of hair. And last but not least, body malfunctions. So today, we're going to talk about how our cells age. So Dr. David Sinclair, the professor of genetics at Harvard Medical School, did a sort of research with his fellow colleagues on some defining of why cells age. So they believe that it is due to wear and tear, or in other words, the lack of oxygen that cells absorb. So they believe that, when we breathe in oxygen. So without enough sufficient oxygen, the energy engines, aka the mitochondria in our cells, become less efficient at turning physiological fuels such as glucose that we intake, like bread or rice that we eat, into the energy, also called ATP, that the cell needs to function. So eventually, if it doesn't have enough oxygen, it dies out. So you probably have seen it in your biology lesson, and I don't want to make it all like boring and stuff, so this is, oops, sorry. But, I'm sorry for that, but this is like a typical mitochondria that you see every day. And so I'm just going to give you like a few details on the mitochondria. So it is a membrane-bounded organelle found in most eukaryotic cells. So you probably have it. It is also called a powerhouse or cellular power plant because it produces the ATP that we need through the inputs that we intake. So it also generates adenosine triphosphate, which is ATP, also known as the energy, at the matrix for chemical energy through this very important component in our bodies called NAD. So one of my schoolmates is going to be talking more about NAD. So what I'm trying to say is that mitochondrion is very important as it also controls the cell growth and the cell cycle. So for the matrix is found in the inner mitochondrial membrane, which contains a lot of proteins. So it performs redox reaction of oxidative phosphorylation and ATP synthesis. So that's where all the bread and all the rice that we intake turns into the energy that we use for sleeping, eating, or writing, etc. So it contains a highly concentrated mixture of enzymes, ribosome, and NAD, etc., for very specific and vital tasks in our bodies. So it's something that we don't really want to miss. So here's the coolest part of the presentation, where there's this new innovative discovery performed by some Australian and US researchers. So in a paper that I sort of analyzed, it talks about this whole new discovery on possibly slowing down or reversing aging. So as of below, that's Dr. Nigel Turner, who works at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia. He and a bunch of really awesome and cool scientists kind of published this study from the research journal Cells. And their objective of their research is to investigate the causes of aging. So they're kind of like investigating more on the breakdown in this very important communication process. And within the cell, so like in your cell, there's this communication thing going on, so between the nucleus and the mitochondria. So as the communication goes on, as we age, the communication is like a married couple. So when you're really young, they have really good communication, so you generate a lot of ATP very efficiently. However, as you age, the communication is less effective because you're growing old and you like kind of degenerated your cells. So this communication becomes less effective. And so that's why we age. And we don't, when like we see an old lady or an old man, they don't have enough energy. That's because the communication between the nucleus and the mitochondria has become less efficient. So therefore, they're trying to figure out some way to reverse or delay aging in human beings. So there's this whole theory behind the fountain of youth, which I just mentioned. And for NAD, which is the main component of converting input, like the bread and rice that you eat, into ATP. So without the NAD, even like if you eat a lot of like bread and stuff, it doesn't mean that you produce enough ATP, because without the main component, nothing will ever happen. So as I've just said, my fellow schoolmate will be talking more about it, and it is also a kind of coenzyme component which you'll need later. And for ATP, adenosine triphosphate, also the energy, will be talked about by my other schoolmates as well. So, Dr. Turner and his researchers, what they did in this research and this experiment is that they tested on mice. So they're trying to specifically map the way that our nucleus and mitochondria communicate, so how they, from an early age to an old age, communicate. So they're trying to map each and every single case. So then they can develop, actually they are developing a compound, a very special compound, to restore the problem by increasing the key molecule DNA. So as I just mentioned, when you grow old, your NAD starts decreasing, so you don't get as much energy as you want to. So right now they're trying to increase the NAD, so therefore you have like a smooth running of production of energy. So they're trying to increase that, so that will possibly help and reverse the unhappy consequences of aging. So they tested on mice. So in these trials, the compound that they developed was given to a group of mice ranging from the age of 2 years old to 6 months. So there's a group of young mice that's 6 months old, and there's a group of older mice who's 2 years old. And their equivalence to human beings is that 6-month-old mice is equivalent to 20-year-old human beings, while this 2-year-old mice is equivalent to 60-year-old human beings. So that's like a huge, complete contrast. And it is a 1-week treatment where they continuously give this sort of compound that they have developed for these mice for 1 week. And also they have to have some controlled variables, such as restricting their calories intake or the level of exercising. So then the experiment will be more effective. So, out of all our expectations, there has been a lot of outstanding results that happened in the mice. So, those who have intake, the 2-year-old mice, who have intake the developed compound, it figures out that they have more energy produced. So they become more energetic because they have more energy, and therefore they can perform more activities. And also, their muscles were toned. So, like when you see old people, their muscles are like a little dangly and stuff, but in those cases, their muscles were a lot toned, and they show like traits of very young mouses' characteristics. And it also led to a big improvement in their insulin resistance. So there's a whole lot of good stuff happening in those mice who have taken those compounds they have developed. So this major breakthrough, the main perspective is to slow down and reverse aging. And seeing that as I've said, like those 60-year-old could feel as if they're 20 years old. So that is a dream come true for many people. So as this sort of research goes on, they're trying to figure out more about this compound and what it does to human beings. So they're trying to study the long-term effects and the safety precautions happening in people. So let's say like the compound, could it do any effect, negative or positive effects to people as it is used for long-term? And they're starting this human trial next year. So it is a great breakthrough. After using on mice, it so happened that it was a positive result. It so happens that they're doing on humans. So it's like a huge breakthrough, and someday when they develop a lot of these compounds, perhaps you guys could use it as well. But they're using it to sort of prevent and delay the onset of diseases such as cancer and diabetes, because when you age, the communication is less efficient, as I've just said, then it causes a lot of errors inside your body, and therefore it develops a lot of diseases such as those on the screen. So, if we have this kind of compound to save us all, then we don't have to suffer from those diseases potentially. And also, one bad thing about this whole research is it's very unfortunate that it is very expensive, because it costs $40,000 per day. So it's gonna cost a whole lot of your money, and so we have to thank technology for kind of developing as it grows, so then potentially it can go to a very low cost, then we cannot consume it regularly. So for cordyceps is what my schoolmate will be talking about. It is also called as dongchenghacho, if you don't know that. But it is just this whole really interesting perspective on aging and also on our human bodies. So that's it for my presentation. There is some credits for the writers and researchers of the paper that I analyzed. And as you can see, Dr. Nicole Turner is right there, like in bolded words, if you can see. But yeah, without them, I don't think anybody will ever know the significance of our body, and also through different cells we can experiment on. So that is it for my presentation, and thank you all for listening.
Good afternoon, Ms. Lee, teachers, and everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about what is mitochondria, NAD, and how they relate to the anti-aging. So first, allow me to refresh your memory about what is the aging process, as Carmen has just mentioned. Professor David Sinclair, who initiated the whole anti-aging project, he said that the aging process we discovered is like a married couple. When they're young, they communicate well. But over time, living in close quarters for many years, communication will break down, and just like a couple, restoring communication solves the problem. And this communication we're talking about is actually communication between mitochondria and nucleus and the nucleus in our cells. The aging process is very closely related to our mitochondria, and the mitochondrial dysfunction is a hallmark of aging. As we age, the levels of the initial chemical NAD will decline, and NAD is actually naturally generated in our bodies. And the communication between mitochondria and the nucleus will decline. And this will reduce the cell's ability to make energy. Therefore, the signs of aging and the disease will become apparent. Now, I'll talk to you about what is mitochondria. As Carmen has just mentioned, mitochondria is the powerhouse of our cell, which oxidizes food to form most of the cell supplies ATP through aerobic respiration. And it is actually a key biological player of aging. The origin of mitochondria is from endosymbiosis, which suggests that mitochondria were originally prokaryotic cells, and they have their own genetic information, that is the circular DNA. Originally, it was just a very small prokaryotic cell, and it got incorporated into a whole cell, and it will become an organelle of that whole cell. This diagram illustrates what is the endosymbiotic theory, which states that when originally that was just an ancestral prokaryote, which is very small cell, and it grows in size, and that it will eat up some organelles such as mitochondria and chloroplast, and soon the mitochondria will become an organelle of that cell and provide energy for that cell. And next, I'm going to talk to you about what is NAD. Its full name is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. It is a coenzyme found in all living cells. It is in the form of a dinucleotide, which consists of two nucleotides joined together through the phosphate grooves. One nucleotide contains an adenine base, and the other is nicotinamide. So, this horribly complex name thing works by oxidation. The mitochondria will oxidize food to release ATP, that's the energy. And oxidation actually can be defined as the removal of hydrogen from a molecule. As a hydrogen atom consists of a proton and an electron, these two are removed during oxidation. And when one molecule has its hydrogen removed, another molecule must gain that hydrogen, and that means that hydrogen is being reduced. In a redox reaction in cell, an enzyme is involved in transferring the hydrogen, that means the proton and the electron, to NAD+. Once the substrate and the NAD+ are bonded with the enzyme, the hydrogen is then transferred from the substrate to the NAD. In other words, the food substrate are oxidized and it loses the hydrogen, and the NAD is reduced to NADH. And NADH, a high energy electron carrier, diffuses away and is available to donate the hydrogen to other molecules. Therefore, the coenzyme is found in two forms of cells. NAD+ is an oxidizing agent, and it will accept electrons from other molecules and become reduced. And also, the reaction I just mentioned forms NADH, which can then be used as a reducing agent to donate electrons. And these electron transfer reactions are the main functions of NAD. And this is a diagram which shows how NAD can be converted into NADH, and this reaction is reversible, but it's all too complicated, I think. So we're going to jump next to how NAD relates to aging. Well, NAD is actually a fuel for cell energy production, and it will use oxygen with the help of coenzyme Q10 to make ATP and water. One of the main functions of NAD is to repair the damaged cells and DNA. And it's also one of the most important antioxidants in our body, and it can also stimulate adrenaline and dopamine production. According to an experiment by Professor George Burke Mayer, he isolated some heart cells and he incubated them in NAD. And then he measured the ATP content in those cells, and he found that there was actually 80% more. And after 6 hours, all cells that weren't incubated in NADH are dead. But 50% of those that were incubated survived. And this leads to two experimental findings. First, when the amount of NAD increased, the ATP we generated also increased, and our energy in our body will increase. And this is actually very important for the development of cancer treatment. These cancer cells have ATP deficiency. And second finding is that the more NAD we have, the longer the cell can live, and eventually, the longer we can live. And as just I mentioned, aging is actually the decline of communication between the mitochondria and the nucleus. So, by administering a compound that the cell can transform into NAD, the communication and the mitochondrial function can be rapidly restored. That means aging can be slowed. This very famous and very striking experiment states that there is a 2-year-old mice being given NAD for just 1 week. And it turned out that it has a tissue resembling that of a 6-month-old mice. And if the compound is given earlier, the aging process could even be reversed. And this experimental technique has implications for treating cancer, type 2 diabetes, muscle wasting, inflammatory and mitochondrial diseases. And NAD can also reduce lipid peroxidation, cholesterol level, and blood pressure. It can also reduce the chances of Alzheimer's disease, which are all the age-related diseases. So when you get older, you get all these kinds of diseases. And Dr. Zhang is starting a future clinical study because the high cholesterol has a positive correlation with age. Because when you get older, many people will have a very high cholesterol level. And there's a very common kind of medication for cholesterol nowadays. It's called statin. But it's got a side effect, is that it will damage liver cells. So Dr. Zhang has been studying it would intake the cordyceps alongside with vitamin B complex. Because the cordyceps can greatly reduce the cholesterol level, because the cordyceps can be, it contains something that can be converted into NAD analog in our body cells, and in turn it can restore communication between mitochondria and the nucleus in our cells. And also vitamin B complex has some ingredients which are NAD building blocks. And there's some empirical observations that this experiment lowers cholesterol level very significantly. And now Dr. Zhang is actually recruiting many experimental targets to achieve a statistical significance for his experiment. And we hope that we can lower the serum cholesterol and simply by intaking some food supplements that are accessible to everyone and not because the original experiment is really expensive, and we hope that we can just intake some food supplements that are easily accessible from on the streets or whatever, and can achieve this result. And this ends my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so let me start by telling you once again why we age. Okay, the reason that we age is because as we grow older, our cells experience this lack of oxygen, such that the cells will die out and mitochondria becomes less effective in converting your glucose into energy, so you will eventually die. However, lately we have a discovery, as my friends have mentioned already, that by feeding the mice NAD, they can actually revert the age of their cells. So theoretically, we can actually reverse aging by taking in NAD. However, since you have already heard a lot about NAD, let me get into two concepts that can help you to understand how you can actually maybe revert aging. So first, we will talk about adenosine triphosphate. Okay, 你再发烧。We will also talk about cordyceps. Okay. ATP. So adenosine triphosphate we have all heard of in our biology lesson. They call it the ATP. So what do we have in an ATP? Firstly, we have a nitrogenous base, adenine, which you can see here. The white ones are hydrogen, the blue ones are nitrogen, and the black ones will be carbon. So this is nitrogenous base. We also have a 5-carbon sugar called ribose sugar. So I think we all heard of ribose sugar when we learned about RNA, the genetic material. So as you can see here, the carbon in ribose sugar are numbered from 1 to 5. We also have 3 phosphate groups. So the thing about phosphate groups is that they are linked together by high energy bonds. So high energy bonds are things that are like springs, which when you bond them together, a lot of energy is stored. And when you break them, energy is released. So this energy is used for our daily activities. The actual process of producing the energy is like this. First, you take this ATP and add it to water. So this is hydrolysis. and they undergo a chemical reaction and release energy. The products, the products will be ADP and phosphate group. So, do you know what is the difference between an ADP and an ATP? Yeah, okay. Let me tell you. In an ADP, we have, as I highlighted here, a hydroxyl group. So this is a result from the hydrolysis. And this process can give us energy. However, this process can actually be reversed through respiration and photosynthesis. So ADP can turn back into ATP by the process called dehydrolysis. Now the main function of ATP is to provide energy for us. So actually, whatever you're doing now, you're using ATP. It also helps us to build complex molecules within the body. So NAD, the magical chemical we just talked about, is built from ATP. And we also have RNA, the genetic material. ATP also generates electricity because as we all know that our nervous system actually functions by the transmission of electrical messages. So ATP is responsible for generating this electricity. Okay, so now we get to cordyceps. Cordyceps in Chinese is winter warm summer grass. And how is this thing formed? Well, the formation involves like this. The story is like in winter when the caterpillar of the ghost moth, they go into the mountains to search for food. They will accidentally eat something, the fungus, such that the fungus can live inside their bodies and become a parasite. So that in the summer they will grow and they will look like grass. Cordyceps are usually used for medicine. So the harvesting period is between April and August, and they are found at an altitude about 3,800 meters. Here are a few places that you might actually find them, so you're welcome to try. Cordyceps contain some very important things that contribute to their functions. Here we have the normal adenosine and something called the cordycepin. So cordycepin is normal adenosine, only they are deoxygenated at the third position. So this is very important for the function. And we also have two other different forms of adenosine we call adenosine analogs. The main uses of cordyceps are mainly contribute to the fact that they have ATP and cordycepin. Firstly, they can be used to treat fatigue because it has increased ATP, so we have increased energy for respiration, and therefore we take in more oxygen. So for people who live in high mountains, this is very useful because by taking more oxygen, they can fight against high altitude syndrome. Also, cordyceps can help us to treat cancer. I think we learned in biology lessons that for a DNA, the ribose, the sugar is linked together at the third and the fifth position. But however, since the cordyceps have the cordycepin, the third position is deoxygenated. So they cannot link together. And when you put them among the cancer cells, they will interfere with the DNA replication of the tumor cells, so that cancer cells will not grow. So it is effective in fighting against cancer. So all in all, what have we talked about today? Firstly, since cordyceps help us to produce ATP, and ATP is the building material of NAD, and NAD is the thing that helps us to revert aging. Therefore, if you really want to look younger, you might as well try to take some cordyceps. Dr. Zhang is currently doing an experiment. He tries to test whether by taking in cordyceps and vitamin B complex, we can lower the cholesterol level. So yes, this is the end of our presentation. Thank you.
我想問下，咁如果有一個過量嘅 intake 嘅 cordyceps，會唔會有啲咩副作用咧？
Well, as just now, ATP is responsible for the making of NAD, and NAD can stimulate the intake or production of ATP. It's possible to achieve a balance where the aging process is completely stopped, or it is too much like a fantasy where we can build our body like immortal. If there's a limit, what is it related to?
My question is, if we can actually use the same methods, can we generate electricity for like appliances such as fans, cameras, clocks, watches?
Think 有足夠嘅 NAD 啦，咁就可以個 aging 可以 reverse 啦。咁例如話一個人你即係呢個理論上就一個人60歲咧，就將個本嘅 NAD 就變翻20歲啦。咁如果你突然間停止咗呢個 NAD 嘅供應，咁佢實際唔會變翻20歲，即係會好快即刻衰老翻嘅。